Polling centers started to close in Honduras as the first preliminary results should be announced around 8 p.m. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, arrived in the Amazon region to attend to the affected communities after the strong earthquake of magnitude 7.5 registered in the country earlier this Sunday. Top European migration officials are holding an emergency meeting on Sunday in the French port city of Calais to find ways to better fight migrant smuggling. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada. Polling centers started to close in Honduras as the first preliminary results should be announced around 8 p.m. As elections unfolded, the electoral authorities and the main candidates called for calm in these elections. At 5 p.m. local time, the voting centers closed, and it's up to the members of the voting boards to extend the closing time of those centers that delayed opening on Sunday morning. According to international observers, the voting remained calm despite violence forecasts. The presidential candidate for the Liberty and Refoundation political party, Xiomara Castro, asked the citizens to attend the polls and to exercise their vote in peace.
First of all, what we are saying is that it should be a civic celebration in peace and that we should all be able to go out to vote. The time has come. This is the moment and the opportunity for all Hondurans to make a change in our country, a real change. And that change is represented by this woman who is speaking to you, to tell you that we should have peace and disregard to provocations.
The presidential candidate for the Liberty and Refoundation Party, Xiomara Castro, also reiterated her commitment to install a government of national reconciliation.
I have a very big commitment. Logically, I want to tell you that I am not the only one who has the answer. We are going to install a government of reconciliation because our society cannot continue to be divided as it has been these 2 last years. We cannot continue to live in the fear of blackmail our society is living today. We cannot continue to allow this. We need to achieve a government of national integration.
Authorities of the National Electoral Council of Honduras said that in the evening they will offer preliminary results of the general elections taking place in the country.
As a plenary of 3 members and in public session, we will go out tonight to issue the first preliminary electoral results that will be given progressively. These are the only official results to be considered. We remind the citizenship that the results of single ballot boxes or any other type of exercise does not have any official value and therefore should not generate any expectation.
Ana Paula Halgorzia, vocal of the National Electoral Council, said that the institution has guaranteed the general elections and called on the people to accompany the process in all its stages.
As the National Electoral Council, we have already guaranteed the holding of these elections. All the electoral ballots are there at their destination and voting will soon begin. We are continuing with the delivery of kits to implement the pre-voting system, a tool that we hope will cover the country. But if this is not the case, it will not affect the integrity of the vote. The records that cannot be transmitted will be processed with all the security measures required by the National Electoral Council, and we ask for the support of citizens as best observers of the process, and of course of the national and international observation missions.
As a member of the Center for the Study of Democracies SPAD, Shen Rao offered his remarks about what is happening in Honduras and his role as an international observer during the election process.
So given past concerns about fraud and irregularities with the elections, today we have dispersed our international elections observers groups across Tegucigalpa, and we'll be keeping an eye out for irregularities not only in terms of infrastructure, like is there electricity in the polling stations, is there access to people for voting, but also irregularities in terms of any potential suspicious activity involving party officials who could be in the room, involving any sort of voter intimidation We'll be keeping an eye out for this, and then we'll be reporting on these issues throughout the day.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. As we follow up the events in Honduras during the general elections, we invite author and activist Stephen Stefton to join us on the matter. We welcome Stephen.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
To have you here. Now, Stephen, these elections will see not only a new president in Honduras, but more important, a substitute to outgoing President Juan Orlando Hernandez that will inherit a country plunged in economic and political crisis. So, which are the political paths from Honduras from now on, depending on who wins?
Yeah, and the elections involve around 5 million Hondurans voting for the new president and vice president. And also they're voting for 128 members to their legislature, the National Congress in Honduras. They're voting for 20 deputies to the Central American Parliament, but they're also voting for around 300 mayors and around 2,000 municipal councillors. So they're very, very important elections that are going to reshape the whole political map of Honduras, especially if the Libre Party wins as they're expected to do. The opinion polls suggested that the Libre Party had something like a 17 or 18% lead over the ruling National Party and their candidate Nasri Asfour. And in third place, well behind, was Yanni Rosenthal of the traditional Liberal Party in Honduras. And as you say, and these elections are important in regional terms, both for the neighbors of Honduras in particular, for the United States especially, and especially for the well-being of the people in Honduras, because they've had since 2009, what's that, 12 years? 12 years of neoliberal rule in which the priority of their ruling classes and the oligarchy and in effect, the organized crime gangs that have had control over Honduras for the last 12 years under the National Party presidencies of first of Porfirio Lobo and subsequently of Juan Orlando Hernandez. And the Honduran population has been subject to measures that prioritized the needs of the oligarchy and relegated their needs in terms of basic healthcare, education, the most basic needs of a population anywhere, completely to the margins. And so if Xiomara Castro does win as substantially as we hope she will, and the Libre Party are already claiming victory, and they've called for a press conference at 8 o'clock, pretty much at the same time as the preliminary results are supposed to be issued by the National Electoral Council in Honduras. And if they have won as successfully as we hope, then there's a real chance of substantial change in Honduras so that their government will focus on the needs of the human person and the needs of the Honduran population, rather than on the needs of corporate business, especially international big business.
Yes, indeed. We know this is a very important election. So, Stephen, taking into account the recent elections in the region, we can mention Sandinismo's consolidation in Nicaragua, Chavismo in Venezuela, and the government of Argentina gaining Congress seats despite losing some in the Senate. How these elections could affect the regional political landscape?
Well, the election in Honduras is absolutely crucial from the point of view of not just in terms of the Central American region, but I'd argue very strongly in terms of the whole Latin American and Caribbean region. I'd say that it's a crucial election that is likely to be a turning point, because it'll mean that you have a government, a relatively progressive government, although it has to be borne in mind that Xiomara Castro has not been able to put forward as radical a program as her husband, the former Honduran President Mel Zelaya, largely because Libre has gone into the elections in alliance with other political forces in Honduras who are largely center or even center-right. And so while we can expect a vast improvement in terms of the domestic policies that Honduras the new Honduran government will be able to implement on behalf of its people, it's probably too much to ask that Honduras makes a radical change in its international position in terms of foreign affairs. But I do think that they'll be supportive of Venezuela, they'll be very supportive of Cuba, they'll be supportive of Nicaragua, but they might stop short of rejoining ALBA, which was one of the reasons that former President Mel Zelaya was overthrown back in 2009. I was in Tegucigalpa on the night of the night before the coup and the day of the coup, and that was a drastic shock for the region and a drastic setback for the region, particularly Central America, but also a drastic setback for ALBA. Nobody thought after the summit of Trinidad and Tobago, in which Barack Obama in that year, 2009, suggested that US policy might change, nobody really thought that just 2 months later, the US would completely betray that commitment and engage in yet another military coup in the region. So on the basis of that experience, Xiomara Castro and her government and their foreign policy is likely to be very cautious. But even so, and that is going to be a radical change in the configuration of sentiment in the region, and very welcome news for Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and also Bolivia and other countries with progressive governments and strong progressive movements, for example, and it'll be very encouraging for Lula da Silva in Brazil.
Yes, indeed. So we know this is a very important election for the region. As you were saying, the leftists and the progressive movements are gaining support from the populations of each country. But in this time, as economic natural disasters, corruption, violence, and other social liabilities plunge the country, Honduras make up the majority of the caravans that head north. So given this situation, can we say this is an important election also for the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's absolutely right, because for the US, the United States has a dilemma that it's difficult to know what their real foreign policy is, because there are so many competing strands within their foreign policy establishment. So it's really hard to know what they really want, and if it's even possible to define what they really want. And so on the one hand, they'll be delighted that there's going to be a government that starts meeting the needs, the basic needs of the Honduran population, because in theory, that should slow down what, as you rightly point out, has been accelerating migration from Honduras northwards to Mexico and the United States. And so Xiomara Castro's win will be very welcome news in that sense for the United States. But on the other hand, and they'll be somewhat concerned, of course, that the wife of the former President Mel Zelaya, who took Honduras into ALBA back in 2008, they'll be concerned that she might tend to want to move in that direction also. And also, there's very strong feeling among the Honduran people, and that has been expressed also in particular by the Libre Party leadership, against the US military presence at the Sotocano Air Base, which has the longest runway in all of Central America, and formerly known as Palmarola, which played, of course, a key role in the terrorist war against Nicaragua and in supporting the governments of El Salvador and Guatemala in their counterinsurgency operations against popular rebellions and insurgencies in El Salvador and Guatemala. So in that sense, the United States is likely to be extremely nervous about the fact that Xiomara Castro looks likely to win very substantially tonight in the Honduran elections. And of course, also in terms of the region, I should imagine that Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the president of Mexico, will be extremely pleased that Xiomara Castro, who is ideologically much closer to him, of course, than Juan Orlando Hernandez ever was, he'll be very pleased, and that should mean that Honduras will get the kind of economic and political and moral support for their new government that they so desperately need in order to stand up to the probably quite stringent demands of the United States that are probably going on already behind the scenes now.
Yes, indeed. So finally and foremost, this is an election by the people and for the people. How this voting day can affect or impact the future of Honduran people?
Well, almost certainly they're going to engage in the kind of infrastructure program and the kind of social investment program that has been so successful in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is in effect a model for the world, right next door to Honduras in terms of the success of its social and economic programs and bringing economic and social inclusion to huge numbers of people in Nicaragua, especially women. And so one can expect something similar from Xiomara Castro and her colleagues, people like Patricia Rodas, for example, the former foreign minister under Mel Zelaya, and Mel Zelaya himself, of course, and they're very close to the Nicaraguan government. And they've watched with great interest how Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo and their colleagues in the Nicaraguan government have managed to completely transform Nicaragua just in a period of 10 years. One of the most important things that they're likely to do, apart from infrastructure development, investment in health and education, for example, apart from those measures, the other key thing that they're likely to do is invest heavily in grassroots agricultural and livestock production, which are the backbone of their rural economy and very, very important in terms of developing an inclusive economic system with strong redistribution of wealth to the most needy.
So we thank you, Stephen, for your presence and time hearing from the South.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an honor. We expect more from you. And now we have more news coming up after a final short break. So stay with us. Welcome back. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, arrived in the Amazon region to attend to the affected communities after the strong earthquake of magnitude 7.5 registered in the country earlier this Sunday. The head of state took to Twitter to express his solidarity with the affected citizens. This after meeting with the National Emergency Operations Center Zion to assess the monitoring and evaluate the situation in which the areas where the damages were recorded. The president also informed that he ordered the ministries and the different government agencies to conduct immediate actions to attend to the emergency. The 7.5 magnitude earthquake was registered in the Amazonas region, with aftershocks that were felt in the capital Lima and other cities in the country, as well as in Ecuador and Colombia. Inhabitants of the Ecuadorian provinces of Guaya, El Oro, and Loja also reported damage to buildings as a result of the aftershocks of the earthquake in Peru, but no casualties were reported. Peruvian authorities have instructed the National Risk and Emergency Management Service to monitor the events and assess the damages. Top European migration officials are holding an emergency meeting on Sunday in the French port of Calais to find ways to better fight migrant smuggling. The meeting comes after 27 people died trying to cross the English Channel to Britain in an overcrowded inflatable boat. UK officials will be notably absent from the gathering at the Calais City Hall after Wednesday's sinking, the deadliest of its kind, prompted a new political crisis between Britain and France. It was decided that from December 1st, a plane operated by the EU border agency Frontex will help the countries to monitor their shores. Aid groups, meanwhile, are arguing for more humane, coordinated asylum policies instead of just more police. At makeshift camps along the French coast, clusters of people from Sudan, Iran, and Iraq huddle under the chilly rain, waiting for their chance to cross the channel.
We choose not to invite the British minister here to Calais. We work in Europe with the committee, we show our solidarity, but we want to work with our British friends and allies. First of all, because geography forces us to do so, because the border with Great Britain is a day-to-day border, because there is a sea 30 kilometers from the French and European coast. We have a tunnel, we have very important economic, political and cultural exchanges. The British are our allies, Europe's allies and France's allies, of course, and we must work with them. This meeting was not anti-English, it was pro-European.
EU and NATO leaders meet in Lithuania to assess the migrant crisis in Belarus and Russia's military presence in near Ukraine. The meeting comes ahead of a session of NATO foreign ministers to be held this week in Latvia with the presence of the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and the head of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen once again accused Belarus of organizing the migration crisis on its border as a hybrid threat against the EU with no solid evidence, and expressed concern about the alleged Russian military deployment near the Ukrainian border. Moscow recently warned NATO and United States troops moving closer to Russian borders, using the military maneuvers in Estonia as an excuse.
For months now, Lithuania has been facing a deliberate, cynical, and dangerous hybrid attack, an attack organized by the Lukashenko regime. It is putting at risk the life of innocent civilians lured to the Belarus border under false promises.
We stand ready to defend all allies, and we will continue to provide our partner Ukraine with political and practical support.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.